Welcome back to the podcast. We are here with Matthew Stibbe, who is a serial entrepreneur. He's a marketing maven. He's a writer. He's a pilot. He's a wine enthusiast. He is the CEO of Articulate Marketing. They are a marketing agency that specializes in the technology sector. So whether we're talking about HubSpot websites, growing your traffic, getting quality leads, or driving more sales, Matthew has so much to tell us. So Matthew, glad to be talking to you.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I am delighted to have you. Very gracious, very articulate, which is on brand with your marketing. And what has been your focus the last maybe 3 to 6 months? What has been your passion and what should we know?
Okay. So with the work, we've been exploring how to correlate the results from the content that we create and sort of identify what content leads to marketing and sales success, meaning, did this blog post contribute more to sales than that one? Did this landing page help acquire good qualified leads? So there's a lot of thinking about that reporting and analysis, particularly in HubSpot, and how to identify those high value pieces. For my business as an entrepreneur and running Articulate Marketing, I am going through the last 6 months, probably a little bit longer than that, this big transformation. And if I can put it like this, we're evolving from being what I would call heroic leadership, i.e. me on my own, the entrepreneur going, this is what we're doing, go this way, towards a model of professional management. So about a year ago, I promoted and hired a few people to form a senior leadership team. And we're now trying to make that model really effective. And we're starting our second year of planning. And it's really interesting because I'm having to learn to step back while I make space for these colleagues to be involved in that. It's very hard to tame my entrepreneurial instincts.
Well, I think that's a thing that every entrepreneur struggles with, right? Is that there's kind of these two gears to shift back and forth from, where in one gear, you're the hero, you're like the tip of the spear, you're innovating, you're doing all kinds of things, you're the hero, as you put it. But once you stumble on the gold, you know that it won't sustain, that you need to build this team and have people running your business for you, because at some point your business will die. At some point you will want out of your business. It might grow bigger than you or something like that. So it's important to kind of change your whole personality and say, well, I've done all this work, I've built all these things up, and now I need to kind of systematize it and make it more predictable. That way it's a thing that if I want to take a vacation, if I want to sell it, if I want to just take it easy, or if something else distracts my attention, now this existing business is not something that's built on sand, it's built on stone. So that in itself is interesting. And then you also say that you are doing this whole thing of tracking the content. And so just since that's maybe an easier thing to jump into, tracking the content, like, is that what I picture is maybe like a list of blog posts, and then like, here's the clicks, and here's the sales and things like that. Or here's what's like a graph on the way up, or here's what's on the way down. And so what does it look like when you jump into your HubSpot and you say, I put out all this content, I've tried all these things, now I'm looking at what the results are. What does the kind of reporting or that screen even look like?
Well, this is the challenge, because you can get traffic data, and you can get pretty good traffic data from Google Analytics, or certainly in our world from HubSpot. So you can look at that list of blogs. Fantastic. But then which blogs generate more traffic? Well, that's a step forward. So you might want to do more blogs like that. But for example, you can get a lot of traffic for a blog post about celebrity gossip, but it's nothing to do with B2B technology companies, which is the thing I'm interested in. So you have to figure out what actually is attracting the right kind of traffic. Well, how do you do that? And it's then modeling or understanding the journey from the blog post, the SEO traffic that came into the blog post, through their journey on the website. They looked at this post, this post, this post, this landing page, this CTA, and then they came into our database, and we can start tracking and making that join, that connection, that relationship clear. And that's quite hard. It's harder than we would like. One of the ways that we've been getting at this is off the back of HubSpot's ROI reporting. We're using ROI tracking. So it'll take the value of deals won and sort of back play it through all the content that all the people involved in that deal saw, and using that as a proxy for identifying high value content and low value content. And it's really interesting because the most high traffic site art content on our site is not the content that is bringing in our best qualified leads. So sort of there's something you put on a different set of glasses and you go, oh, that post used to be brilliant, but now I'm not so sure about it. So that, when we're now looking at taking the next step out beyond that, which is to use some API to extract data from HubSpot and analyze it further to try and understand people's journeys through the site and the kind of the tunnels and funnels they follow and which pieces of which content works best. It's a little bit, we're all familiar with the idea of A/B testing CTAs, A/B testing blog posts, A/B testing landing pages. We're all familiar with the idea, well, I hope everyone is, hello everyone at home, with the idea of looking at traffic and maybe conversions on pieces of content. This is a little bit more trying to stitch it all together and understand how the river of leads flows through a site. We haven't nailed it all down yet, but we're getting there.
And it's like just trying to like make sense of all the numbers, all the things, right? It's like I'm picturing in my head like an accountant getting a shoebox of receipts and saying like, well, there's all these receipts I'm digging through, and let me figure out like, well, here's all these numbers, and this is the story that it tells. And there's all kinds of things to think about, like you're mentioning here, that there might be this blog post that gets so much traffic but then doesn't lead to any sales, or there might be this other content that maybe in the past used to have that trail of people would enter the site and end up buying, but then that maybe has changed over time. And it seems like it can very easily be a thing that drives you crazy. And something that's been on my mind even just the last couple of days is whenever I feel like quitting, or I'm thinking like, well, this X task in my business, right? Showing up on podcasts, meeting for podcast interviews, something like that. If I'm thinking, well, is it worth me continuing? Then the answer for me is to kind of look at the logic and say, well, if I do this task and it translates to this amount of money, then I can make a decision and say, well, is that worth continuing? And usually the answer is yes. Usually it's like, whoa, this podcast interview or this blog post equals, $5,000. So of course I'd be an idiot not to continue it. But some of those answers are not intuitive, right? Sometimes it takes jumping into the data, and it sometimes hurts my head. So I guess my question to you is, are you the type of person that you can naturally jump into the analysis, the crunching the numbers, or is that a thing that you've had to learn over time? Or just like, how do we tap into this? What's the secret to getting excited about looking at your dang analytics?
Yeah, I'm not a natural numbers person. I'm a historian by training and a writer by profession at heart anyway. So I think we at the agency, we now have a CFO who, you've used the analogy of somebody going into the shoebox and making sense of the numbers. She's really good at going into the shoebox and making sense of the numbers. And she has some data science qualifications, and she used to be head of business performance at Visa Europe. So she's very used to looking at really big data sets and understanding trends. You used the example of, this blog post used to do well, but now it isn't. What happened and what changed? That's the kind of problem that she really enjoys. What I think I'm bringing to that discussion, so this is the two sides of data science or data analysis in marketing. One is, grappling with the data, making sense of it, extracting it, transforming it, and using it. The other one is the marketing intuition of that changed. That's an interesting question. Or I think that change might be explained by this, but how could we validate that? And so I think that combination of asking the right questions and then finding the right tools to analyze it, that's at the heart of using data in marketing. And anyone who's got a 100% solution to that problem, please get in touch, because I'd love to know. I think we've probably got a 40% problem, and I think the marketing industry as a whole, around 20%. There's a lot of resulting in marketing. What I mean by that is people taking credit for something that that happened on their watch, but they don't understand what they did to make it happen, if they did anything to make it happen. And equally, it's very easy to blame the data or ratty data for something that didn't work out the way you hoped. And the real value of getting this data stuff right is prediction. It's like, I think if we do this, or we know if we do this, it's going to produce this kind of result because we did it 3 times on these other cases. And that, I think, is the holy grail for us, for all marketers looking for data. But this is the second conversation I've had around this topic today. I was talking to somebody, to an academic about it earlier, and just trying to figure out what the right data to use is also challenging, because I think these days, particularly with things like Google Analytics or HubSpot, there's too much. And sometimes you have a near enemy and a far enemy, and too little data has been the near enemy for marketers for a long time, but too much data is also an enemy. It's the far enemy. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, it does, but I mean, there's a lot to follow, and even my brain is kind of going in all sorts of directions as well. But I think that what I'm getting from your answer here is that the answer in today's modern world, as the cliche is with all the sea of data, the answer is to say, here's my question, and then let me go and investigate and get to the answer. And then once I get that, ask another question, because it's far too easy to get lost in the data and play around. And I think that it even ties into your writing expertise and your kind of historian stuff, because it's really easy to just have no point, right? And go on for 3 hours about the fall of the Roman Empire. But as you know, with writing, there's kind of an attention span factor. There's a factor of like having enough information and get your point across, and even just for you to be done as the person that creating the thing. And at least for me, the answer, the solution is to ask a question, and then you write the answer, and then that way well, I know where I started, I know where I ended because the question was answered, and it's kind of the right size because it was long enough to answer the question, short enough to not go off on a bunch of different tangents. So just at least in my mind, you're saying your expertise is writing, question, answer, and then data analysis, question, answer. And then that way it's just like kind of in manageable, logical blocks. And I think that we can all relate to doing something, and then for some reason it worked. I did this webinar and it converted super great, but then I don't know what the heck I did that made the difference. Why? Yes. And it might have just happened on its own. And then I might get cocky. I might repeat it again. And then I didn't get the same result. And it's like very exciting at first, but then frustrating on the other side of that. So then I can see the need for kind of these two sides of the coin you're mentioning here. Question and answer is one part, and then kind of digging deep. Yes.
We had an interesting example of this. I think you're absolutely right. Asking the right question is both critical for being a historian and an interviewer and analyzing data. But sometimes you've got to be a little bit light on your feet. So you ask a question. We had a really interesting question the other day about why our site was being penalized by Google for core web vitals when our analysis suggested that it was working very well and loading fast. Why was that happening? And we went off and I ran a few experiments and looked at some data, and I formulated a series of questions to ask of the data. And in the process of trying to answer those questions, I spotted something in one of the analyses from WebDev, one of the Google's tools for analyzing this. And it showed a graph of the different JavaScript elements that were being loaded on the page that we were investigating, trying to understand why it was running slowly. And just seeing that, and I went, bing, something odd there, and spotting something with some intuition, with some experience, and go, that doesn't look right. That's a really, really big JavaScript file. Changed the question. So, for example, you think the Roman Empire fell because Goths burned down Rome in the 5th century, and actually you go and investigate that, and you then find that there was the Goths have been in the peninsula for years, and in fact it might have been a plague and inflation that caused the fall of the Roman Empire. And then you look into that, and so you ask the question, you investigate, you find some information, you find some insights and data, you test it, and then you find new, better questions to ask and answer. And I think that's the other thing that I'm learning with this is that iterative approach to analyzing the data. But we're all sent here to learn, right, on this planet, and I feel like I'm learning something new every day, and I'm very grateful that I have somebody who is quite good with maths to do the number crunching for me, because I'd be stuck if I had to do it all myself.
And it leaves your mind to free up and to think, and not just be kind of like putting out the fires and doing the manual labor. And that's kind of inspiring and hopeful, optimistic, entrepreneurial. seek the better questions. Start with the questions you have, get the answers, but then lead to the bigger problems, the bigger scope, the bigger questions. And so we mentioned a little bit about like some kind of stories here and there, but something that always interests me are client stories or success stories, right? You have this marketing agency, and it's great that you've accomplished this and you've built up all of that. But when some business out there really needs help, when they're stuck, when they don't know what questions to ask, they don't know what they don't know, and they need you, and you jump in and you work your magic. Do you have any interesting, fun stories about that?
Yeah, there's an interesting example of this with a client that is actually very sophisticated with some kinds of data, but not so much with the marketing, or at least we've been working with them for 3 years or so when we first engaged. And they had a big drop in traffic before we started. So their website traffic had dropped by about 60%. And their conversions had also dropped, but because of the traffic dropping, the absolute number of conversions had really dropped, and it was a real problem for them. So we spent quite a few months working through the issues and trying to diagnose that, and it ended up being a series of different issues. To try and drive the traffic back up, we did a very for us was quite an interesting approach, and like an agile sprint driven, experiment driven approach to increasing traffic and conversion rate optimization. So every month we would compile, with their help and their input, a list of ideas. We think if we do this with your blog, if we try and prioritize featured snippets, or we try and write content that your competitors have got on their site that's doing well, but we can write a better, longer, more interesting version of that, or more useful, and so on. So we had, every month we were identifying sort of 5 to 10 experiments to run on their SEO to get their traffic up, and another 5 to 10 experiments to run on their conversion rate optimization. And each one of those experiments, we defined what we were hoping to see as a result. We think this is going to get you another 5 contacts based on these things, we think, per month, or we think this is going to get you another 2,000 visitors a month by the time we've launched it and it's got out into Google. And it's going to cost you this much money. It's going to cost. We use points pricing, so we quantify and express cost in points. So we would run these experiments, we would do the work, and then we'd report in subsequent months on the results. And sometimes we got the result we expected, sometimes we did better, and sometimes the experiments didn't work. But we had some intuition and some experience in working with other clients to bring to that. But every client is unique as well. Every client has a different product, a different website, a different history, a different background. And that repeated, iterative, data-driven experiment, where we were actually saying, this is the expected result and here's how we measure it, makes it very hard for us as a marketing agency to run away and hide. And we're accountable for that, and we're talking to our client. The challenge with the client, with all clients, is we talk a lot about our stuff in our language. We assume quite a lot of knowledge about marketing. We assume quite a lot of knowledge about SEO or websites or conversions, landing pages, and so on. So there's also a communication challenge to kind of do that. And we found, I think, expressing it as a series of experiments with expected results helps get through that barrier, because what does a client care about? More leads, more sales, right? So we're translating the thing we're doing, the marketing activity, in something they care about, which is broadly traffic conversions and sales. And I think that was a very successful project. And indeed, we were able to regain the traffic that they had lost over about 9 months. So we were able to dial it back up. So they'd lost the traffic before we started, and then over the course of a year, we got them back beyond where they had been. And we're still working with them, and it's really nice. And in fact, because they're sort of data-driven, data-mad people, they are provoking a lot of these thoughts and questions, and what content works. That's largely being driven by them for us. And I think that's so sometimes your client is your best teacher, and sometimes difficult, challenging clients are the very best. Keep you on your toes.
And especially because you are jumping in with fresh eyes, where they might be in some new industry that you're unfamiliar with, and they've just been doing things the way they've been doing them for the past 5 or 10 years. And I really like this kind of mindset you have here about the experiment, that they come to you, they say, here's the problem, traffic has dropped. And you say, here's 5 to 10 ideas, experiments, and here's the starting point, here's what we'll try, here's what we'll do, here's what we'll measure it, here's the expected result. And that way it's not just, you don't fall into this trap that you hear sometimes of either an agency as a black box, right? And they say, well, your traffic dropped. We'll fix it. Don't worry. Just let us do it. We won't tell you what we did. But if you stop paying us, then it will go back to the way it was. Or the other extreme is the compliance sort of approach, and it's very dull, right? Like, well, we'll make sure that you have the GDPR cookie pop up, and we'll make sure that you have legal pages, and we'll make sure you're American Disability Act compliance, and all this stuff that no one cares about, no one wants to hear about, and you always think like, okay, like I'd like to hire someone to do this, but I feel like I need to be coming up with the ideas for them. So I love this kind of experiment approach here, because it also avoids the fear of kind of having too much commitment. When you say to someone, you need to put out videos, you need to put out blog posts, there's that fear of like, okay, now this is like a permanent, third arm attached to me. And now I have to pay $5,000 a month forever. And I have to put 30 hours a week into this forever. But when it's just an experiment, it's like, well, we can just kind of try this and see if it solves your immediate problem. And if you really loved it, then we can keep going down that path. And if not, we can do some other experiment. So that's really cool to think about. And so there's been so many interesting and fun ideas that you've shared with us today. And as we're beginning to wind down our conversation, is there a low-hanging fruit? Is there something that in your travels and what you've seen with all these companies, is there something we should all be doing, but we're not currently doing?
Yes. I'm going to give you 3, and they're really, really cheap. First of all, check the copyright date on your website. It's astonishing how many websites have copyright dates that are out of date, and you can change them almost instantly. If you have an out of date one, it makes your site look really old. It's really, really easy, quick thing to fix. Second thing, if you haven't done it and you have a website, sign up for Google Search Console. Put your sitemap into Google Search Console. If it tells you that your site is slow, make it faster. But also it'll give you a tremendous insight into the search terms that are bringing traffic to your website. And there's no one else in the world is going to tell you what Google is actually sending, what keywords Google is using to send traffic to your site, except Google Search Console and a little bit with the advertising. So that's the second thing. Third thing is go to Google, the phrase Google Page Speed Insights, and put your URL into that and see what how Google thinks your website is performing. So there's 3 things you could do right now in less than half an hour that will give you some real insight and data that most of our clients, when they come to us, don't pay attention to or don't know they have available. I probably could think of some more, but those are the ones that come immediately to mind. I hope that helps.
It does. And why think of more? Why list 10 things when there is something that could easily be done right now? Before you get a glass of water, before you stop and go to the bathroom, before you get up from your chair, don't think, just do these things. Number 1, update your copyright date. It's easy enough to do. And I'm even thinking of, you're making me imagine here, Matthew, of like, I've been at this website or that website where it's like, it's just like a year or 2 out of date, but still 2 years is a long time, especially these days. So update your copyright date on the bottom there, sign up for Google Search Console and upload your sitemap. A few clicks, easy to do. And it's a nice dipping your toe in the water so that by the time you contact Matthew and his agency and he's speaking some of this lingo, because he mentioned that sometimes it's easy to throw around words and terms, jargon that we're not familiar with. So at least you can log into Google Search Console and claim your web property there. And then that way you can at least see some of these things that he's talking about. So that's number 2, Google Search Console and sitemap. And then number 3, Google Page Speed Insights, because we've all been to those web pages where it took a whole 5 seconds to load it. I'm out of here. What kind of fly-by-night operation is this? I want it to load instantly right now. And Google Page Speed Insights will tell you those things, like how Matthew said that there was like an issue where like a JavaScript file was super big and loading super long. And I mean, Google, they will get you for one of those just
We've
minor
seen
issues.
client websites where they've uploaded a 14 megabyte graphic file and the page just sits there for like 20 seconds loading this huge image, and just really basic stuff like that. But all of these tools, really, what's really valuable about it, Google gives them away for free, and it gives you a way to see your website through Google's eyes. And I think, where do people go when they want an answer? They go to Google. You need to be on Google. You need to kind of work with Google as a sort of remote arm's length partner to make sure your website's findable.
And Google wants you to do these things. Like when I was younger and I was trying to learn how to drive a car, I was so frustrated learning all the rules and how to do all these things, that pass the test, get my license. But then they just want you to drive safely. They want you to get a driver's license in the same way. Google wants you to have a fast loading site, to have a high ranking site, but you just have to do a few of the things that they want you to do. And the good news is that if your competitors are only doing 10 out of 50 of the items and you're doing 20 out of 50, right, you don't even have to do them all. Just be better than most of your competition.
You don't have to outrun the lion. You don't have to outrun the lion. You just have to outrun the fat missionary who's behind you.
Yes, exactly. Just the bear's chasing you. You make sure your shoes are tied, and then your friend can get eaten by the bear, and then you'll get away. Perfect. I love it. And so if someone here is completely wildly impressed with the information you shared here, with the knowledge bombs, what's the next step? If they want to contact you and your agency, how do they know if they're a good candidate for what you do, and where do they go? What is the next step?
Okay, so one of our core principles at Articulate is we share what we learn. So we have a lot of blog posts that are free and useful for anyone who's interested in any of the things I've been talking about. I do a fortnightly webinar. Again, it's not a pitch for us. It's just sharing what we learn. Both of those things you can find at articulatemarketing.com. Articulate marketing is one word. And if you're interested in exploring working with us, we'd love to hear from you. We work primarily for business-to-business technology companies, so from Dell down to two-person startups. And again, articulatemarketing.com is the place to go. But if you go to articulatemarketing.com/meet, MEET, you will see my calendar. You can book a call with me. No questions asked. Happy to chat, tell you anything, answer any questions. I'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. So if this sounds good, and I think it does, the place to go is articulatemarketing.com. And then if you want to jump to the very end, jump to the end of the line there, articulatemarketing.com/meet. And if this podcast interview has really captured your attention, which I think it has, because you've made it this far along in the episode, then this is something that you've been putting off. This needs to be a priority for you and your business. Now is the time. You've let yourself get overwhelmed in the past with all of these terms like Google page speed, insights, and whatnot, but it's been to your detriment. And what can be amazing is that Matthew and his team can make it simple for you. They can tell you what your problem is. They can tell you what these experiments are that could possibly solve your problem and give you a detailed plan. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain by going to articulatemarketing.com to start that conversation, take the next step, and solve this problem that you need to solve in your business, which is you need more traffic, you need more content, you need more conversions, leads, and sales. So the place to do that is articulatemarketing.com. We will see you there. And thank you, Matthew, for stopping by and just giving me personally like 52 ideas. It was awesome.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Robert.